Welcome back to the Atomic Level Matt Chats Office Hours here on the Wealth Matters 3.0 channel, the show where we decode the matters of wealth one insightful conversation at a time with the one and only Matt Meuli, my partner on the Shields and Succession Digest, so that you can grow and protect your net worth as well as your net happiness. I'm Chris Snook, and Matt, welcome back.
Well, thanks, Chris. Appreciate to be here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you on my Wednesday morning.
Yeah, so we're in our third week of these now, and this week's conversation is kind of focused in on the realization that hit me while we're writing our latest Shields and Succession article around Gen Xers and what they're actually losing sleep over. And it isn't about what they're going to inherit. It's really more about the administrative mess or the chaos that might get added to their lives and the fear of being surprised, right? The passwords nobody can find, the accounts nobody knows exist, the healthcare decisions we didn't document, the sibling conflicts nobody wants to have happen, but that we haven't really addressed because it's the elephant in the room. And perhaps most importantly, especially for Xers who kind of live in this world where we grew up without digital and then we became hyper digital because we were like the last generation to live analog and then embrace digital first. So we kind of worry, I think, most about the predators that arrive before the death even does. And we worry about our parents in new ways now. We worry about kids in new ways. And we just worry. That's what Gen Xers do. So everything from the financial scams to the romance scams, identity theft, fraudulent caregivers, unscrupulous advisors, opportunistic relatives, long-term care, probate delays, administrative chaos is what we wrote about this week. And I wanted to use this office hours with you to kind of just unpack some of the questions we got, some of the ones that we know people have just from the workshops you do, and this silent fear that many people in midlife have right now about what will mom and dad leave me in the way of a mess, not necessarily in the way of assets. Obviously, there's that too. So for those who don't want to spend their next 5 years defending their parents instead of enjoying their remaining years with them or some equivalent of that, today's show is all about you. We've got the man, the myth, the legend from Northern Colorado and Wyoming here with us to do that. So let's start with the big one, Matt. Just level set for us. Who are the predators that can arrive before someone dies? And when most people think about estate planning, they typically think about getting their affairs in order before death. Um, you've watched in your 38 plus years, you've watched families get attacked long before that, and you've kind of watched that change form in recent times. So talk to us a little bit about who those predators are and kind of how to recognize or prepare for some of that.
Okay, yeah, sure, Chris, I can answer that. I am an attorney, but I may not be your attorney. I'm only your attorney if we have an engagement letter or something like that. So what I'm offering today are just some observations and opinions that I've seen as an attorney, but it's not really legal advice. I just wanted to get that out there. So,
Very good.
um,
I usually do the disclaimer, but it sounds better coming out of your mouth.
well, yes, it's always fun to say I'm not your attorney. I do even play one on TV, but not very well.
But he can be
So
your attorney. We'll put those numbers in there for those who decide they need to have a bigger conversation. But
yeah, we can.
yeah,
I do. I'm required by all those rules to say that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
that's my predator and imposters and things that make me do all that stuff. So, speaking of predators and imposters, that's one of them that you can get is someone kind of faking to be a government official or something like that, and calling up and asking for information like social security numbers, bank accounts, things like that. They say they're from the IRS. Even I noticed that the IRS is no longer allowing us to send checks to pay our bills. And that's what a lot of the people who are more vintage like to do. They don't like getting online and paying things like that. So now someone can call and say, hey, you sent a check, we didn't receive it, so we need you to give us our bank account so we can do that kind of thing. That's one of the big scams we see. Seems like seniors get scammed quite a bit on phones and things like that, on their telephone, the most thing. Other uh, people that can, come after you are family members, even, or they're posing to be a family member. There's some kind of family emergency that they call. They call up and have someone that sounds just like your grandkids saying, "Hey, I've been arrested by the sheriff. I need bail money. I don't want to tell mom and dad. Can you help me out? Can you send me I've heard these people say the sheriff told them to send them Walmart cards or gift cards or something like that, Amazon cards and things like that. So, that can be someone who's after
And
the money.
yeah, some of the folks on this, obviously, with Substack being kind of the primary means, they might be aware enough where they understand like the 11 labs and the AI tools that exist out there that are just scraping existing Instagram accounts or social media or even a podcast like this and recreating your and my voice to where it's indiscernible, calling mom and dad. And the keyword thing, right? Like back in the day, we used to have the don't talk to strangers. Like if someone's going to pick you up, I'm going to give them the safe word, whatever that was. But unfortunately now, most boomers and even a lot of Gen Xers don't know what a random number generator or random word generator is. And there's so much out there in Facebook and in data and social graph about us that even if we pick a word that we think is just Matt and my word. The reality is it's probably, really easy for a nominal hacker to break without too much effort because it's just like our passwords, right? It's the same one as we used in 1998 most of the time. So these things that we have to prepare for, some of them are simple, but they're harder to execute. But the awareness starts first.
The awareness does start first, and I mean, that keyword is still a good viable strategy, or it can be, but you gotta get everybody together, and they have to remember it, and a lot of times these people are getting scammed because their, capacity is getting a little impaired and not, thinking as rational as we can. And on the Substack or on, just the regular computers, we can get the warning that we have a virus and we're Microsoft, so you need to call us and we'll fix it, and you need to pay us over the computer and things like that. So that's the tech support scammer, I guess, that comes in. There's also romance scammers, where they'll come in and on sites and give you fake profiles and things like that, and then all of a sudden, as you get this relationship kind of built, they fake an emergency and need all this money to get out of it. After the love begins, things like
Mm.
that. Those can be total strangers. Sometimes that can be the new spouse who wants to get married. You know, and unfortunately, it even can go down to the caretakers, the people taking care of our elderly and skilled nursing facilities and those kind of things. They can take advantage. We end up seeing people, getting on the will who was the caretaker, that all of a sudden that they're now the primary beneficiary and the kids and other things have been
How do
removed.
those kind of things on that like specific use case, how does something like that happen without somebody knowing? And what kind of simple provisions could you put in place for mom and dad or whoever the person may be that would prevent a change like that? Just that one
Well,
specific.
that like the will and trust and things like that, you typically need an attorney or something to get in there to change that. I mean, you can write your own. You can do a holographic will, which holographic just means you write it in your own handwriting. You have enough formalities to say this was your last will and testament. But then you're in court fighting it, saying it was undue influence or it was a scam or things like that. But even more, what happens is retirement accounts. Retirement accounts are just typically changed by a change of beneficiary. You're not really changing the owner, you're just changing who it goes to. And the change in beneficiary can be done by a power of attorney. So a lot of times, these you'll get this relationship going. This person will rely on the caregiver, start building the trust and things like that, and then they'll have them sign a power of attorney, and then they'll use that to switch out the accounts or the beneficiary of the accounts. And it's very difficult. If there's no spouse, it's very difficult to find that unless that person has a champion. Somebody that's expecting to receive the money. Because if these people are lonely, what happens is they'll take away their phone, and just basically say, "Well, your family no longer loves you. They never call," and things like that. You just have me to rely on. And the caregiver's the one feeding them, taking care of them, and so pretty soon it's just like, if you want this to continue, since I'm the only person you have, I'd like you to sign this document, which is a power of attorney, giving them the power to change some of these things. So that's typically what we see that can happen. For the person running the finances and things like that, it's just kind of important for them to keep a track of this because, as the brothers and sisters are being removed for the nieces and nephews, or all of a sudden, this plan that had been in place for 20, 30 years starts getting altered. that's the time where a good financial advisor will contact somebody, the elder abuse or something like that, or attorney that the elder had worked with for their original will and things like that, and see what you can do. But again, you usually have to go to court and prove undue influences and things like that. So it's very difficult to prove that. It's very difficult to keep that from happening unless you maintain your relationship with your parents so that you know what's going on. And that's basically why this all happens, Chris. I mean, it's like, we're no longer working, we've retired, so we don't have that camaraderie at work. We don't have those people to talk to. We're kind of locked up in our place. We may have it's difficult for us to get around. We may not be able to drive anymore. We, just can't go down to McDonald's and have coffee with all the people down there. So we basically just looking for a relationship with somebody because we're lonely, and our kids do what they can, but they're raising their kids and they're working and trying to be our friend as well. And so what ends up happening is you're just dying to talk to somebody else. So when that phone call comes and they sound so happy that you're on the line, you just kinda spilled beans to them.
Yeah, let's talk about let's keep going on that, but I wanna frame this up in this context because we hear a lot, especially on Substack. Finance has got some tremendous authors, many of which have been on the Atomic Level podcast, many of which will be if I as soon as I can get to them. But, market risk is what you hear a lot about. Market volatility is what you hear a lot about, and people spend countless of hours worrying about that. Am I in the right stock? Am I in the right asset allocation? Should I have more gold? Should I have more Bitcoin? Should I have less this? Should I buy whatever? Right? And we spend a lot of time focused on building wealth or expanding it, but we don't spend as much time on the vulnerability risk, right? And worrying about that or proactively protecting against that, which is what you and I are trying to bring to this, niche, right? And so what's more likely to damage their financial future, a market crash or an aging parent becoming vulnerable? And if so, why?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, the market crash, I mean, the way we try to protect ourselves through that is diversification and, length of time, which when someone's getting older, they don't have the length of time. They can't, ride that out and have it raise again as it historically does, the stock market, things like that. So if you're just looking at that brief instant, if the bubble bursts and the person dies that week or something, market crash could literally run everything, take everything. So that's maybe just for that point of time. The problem with the vulnerability is as you age, you may be getting your capacity goes down, dementia and those kind of things may make it harder to reason, harder to know that you're being scammed. And that period of time can be, a moment in time, but it can also be 10, 15, 20 years where you're living that way. And so the actual risk of someone taking the money away from you is bigger because there's more length of time there. So I would, if I had to choose, I would say it's a vulnerability because there's so much more opportunity for a scammer, so much more time for a scammer to get in there, where the market risk, anytime anybody's on a fixed income, interest rates go up, that's kind of makes them more vulnerable as well. But as far as that, that point of time being a long period of years, I think it's a vulnerability.
You also mentioned, in a prior week, I remember we were talking about the last kind of hurrah for long-term care facilities simply because of the cost of receiving that care. Um, in that vulnerability risk, there are things that are kind of needed and necessary that just cost more, and then there's all the opportunistic um, scams that could happen and really prey on the loneliness. I think that's such a key thing because, like you said, Gen Xer especially, like we're already spread thin. We're mid career. We're worried about our own job futures, especially in the world of AI. Most people, you've got kids coming up, men and women that are dealing with their own level of uncertainty and potential nihilism and And then you have aging parents that are just vulnerable, and they even if they still have all their faculties, they just I mean, very few people can compete, and so it can be very paralyzing. But proactively, like, that call's gonna come, and it never comes when you want it to, and it's not the call you wanna receive. So, just pragmatically, without it being an overwhelm, what are most families gonna discover they should have done years ago if they did a couple of things when that phone call comes? Because there's no way we can do it all, but we can do a couple things that you've kinda historically seen probably got forgotten to be done. What are some of those?
Well, one of the things is trying to help with that loneliness there with just making sure that they have someone to talk to. I mean, it might be a senior center in your community, or getting them together. There's adult daycare and things like that, or even just going to assisted living or something where people can build relationships and things like that. The hard thing is, if you have the private parent who just wants to be alone because they realize that their faculties are diminishing and they feel embarrassed by it. So they don't want anyone else to see that. That's the problem. But we're finding that, the some of the tools you can have in place is just having a good way to say, when does that incapacity event occur? And we do it mainly for the financial side of it, when you shouldn't be writing checks anymore. I mean, that's what we've been talking about in this podcast, is more of the financial risk than it is all those, more the financial. So you can set up a trust that basically says, we're going to deem this contract between you and us as beneficiaries and trustees. We're going to say that when the two beneficiaries or three beneficiaries, either by majority or unanimous vote, say that mom shouldn't be signing checks anymore, that's the condition that changes that, and then the trustee changes. And if the trustee can change, that's the one that now approves whether or not the money comes out of the account and things like that. So that can give some protection, but you need to have that set up before your parent becomes incapacitated, because in order to set up any legal documents, you need to be alive, you need to have capacity, and you need to be able to sign. And if you don't have any three of those, you're looking at a conservatorship, a guardianship, going through a probate court to take away all your parents' rights and transfer them to somebody else. So you want to have something in place. I say a trust. The reason why I say a trust over a will is that a will doesn't come into effect until you die.
Right.
So what do you use with a will? You use a power of attorney. And a power of attorney is okay as long as it's up to date, and the institution that you want to use the power of attorney with will accept that power of attorney. Powers of attorneys can be revoked at any time. There's a little less formalities. They don't have the instruction list that a trust has. A trust gives you the right, but also says what you need to do with that right, where a power of attorney just kind of gives you the right. So some banks and other monetary custodians aren't as willing to take those power of attorneys. So, but if you just do have a will and a power of attorney, your power of attorney should be up to date. It shouldn't be really old and things like that, because when a custodian looks at the power of attorney and it's 5 to 10 years old, in their mind, they're saying, this person could have revoked this at any time and I wouldn't know about it. So I'm
Mm,
liable if I follow it. So it's real important to have those things in place. But I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you have some kind of agreement or contractual relation to when incapacity occurs. You're not leaving that up to healthcare professionals to figure out, because they don't want to take away people's rights, because they don't want to be liable for doing that. When you think about it, if you're lying on the floor and your heart stopped working, you want the doctor to come over and make your heart start working again. You don't want them to look over you and say, "Well, you're unable to manage your financial affairs."
right.
Yeah, that's not that's not the point of doctors. So that's a big thing, is just have that in place. Um, and hope
And
you have somebody to pull the trigger too, because a lot of times mom is not willing to take away the check writing ability from dad. They're just too scared to do that. So there's a
Yeah, and incapacity is more likely than death, especially with the advances in medicine, right? Is we all are going to have benefited from a longer lifespan. Um,
Yeah, it's like that market crash. If it happens at one time at the right time, that's devastating. But then you have the other part where you're incapacitated, where someone has so much more chance to scam you. Same thing about going incapacity and death. I mean, death's going to happen to you one time, but you
Right.
got a lot more opportunity where you may not be able to make a decision.
Yeah, yeah, death is gonna come, and when it comes, it's final and it's finite and that's it and whatever, but, the vulnerability risk is kinda like running through a thorn bush and bleeding to death, over 2, 3 decades, right, potentially when it comes to both financial and capacity and other things. So, curious, why are older people, especially today, more so, why are they vulnerable to financial scams? And I say that through the lens of one major assumption, which doesn't mean it's everyone's reality. A lot of folks who have something to protect, who have done any level of planning, will, trust and will, pour over will, whatever level they've gotten to, kind of the basics, as it were, have something to lose, whether it's just a big house that's been appreciating and it's paid off, plus some, retirement stocks or whatever it is. And so, like, they're good. They're not out buying Lambos. They're not, they're at that point in life where they kinda have whatever they really care about. They've traveled wherever they want. Maybe there's 1 or 2 places they'd like to go before they can't. But for the most part, they're not really necessarily chasing upside, theoretically, in that example. So why is it that they're so vulnerable to financial scams? Is it because they don't see them as that? In other words, is it because the way that they come at them is not through a financial gain, it's just through some other mechanism that drains their finances? Or what is it that is the trigger for a lot of older adults?
That's a great question, and I do not have a lot of information on that, although, it's a narrative in the society around everybody. There's so much more information out there, and everyone's hearing about the high costs of care and, how people get wiped out just from the high cost of care. So that immediately puts a fear into somebody that I'm gonna outlive my money,
Mm,
with the medicine and everything like that. So now I gotta do something to raise that monetary level up so I won't outlive my dollar. The other thing is it's very difficult to navigate any government system to get your assistance and things like that. That's very difficult. It's hard for anyone to understand how that works. So there's that part, and there's what do I do? How do I get there? And then a lot of them just are basically stubborn and in denial. That it's happening, and don't need the help. When you have high costs of care and you have high costs of assisted living and things like that, and people take advantage of that, you also kind of put a target on your back because now you're in a facility that you can afford, which means that you have a certain amount of net worth, or you couldn't be in that facility. So, it's just kind of like someone comes and gets a guest list and they kind of know who they want to target and things like that. So those are where I would place why now we're a little more, vulnerable than we were before. And I may have said this on another podcast, but I also see our society is kind of evolving. I say that, the three E's of society. Like when I was young, we're kind of an empowerment society where if you follow the rules and work really hard, you can make it up to the top. And then all of a sudden, it looked like we turned into an entitlement society where it's like, I graduated from college. I should be the CEO. I shouldn't have to work my way up. I'm entitled to have that. And you need to pay me instead of me working, and you need to pay me. And then I thought that was pretty bad enough. But now it's like we've almost moved into this envy society where it's like, well, if I can't have it, you can't have it either. So I'm going to pass a lot of laws so that you can't have that wealth, but either if I can't have it. So I don't have anything to back.
yeah, I think you hit a couple good points there. One that really jumped out at me, just insightful, like it gut level made sense, was even the most prepared, call it boomer, that has kind of done things and benefited from when they entered the market, when they exited it, kind of the last generation to maybe guarantee entitlements, all those things. Even if they've done well, the reality is that their fixed income is fixed, and inflation in all forms, whether it be in the long-term care cost, whether it just be in the price of eggs, whatever it may be, gas, um, it weighs on them because, like you said, they want to live longer and maybe they're healthy, and now they're thinking about it through the lens of, what if I outlive my money because I can't work? I'm not working anymore. and the stock market has kind of become the means of their safety net or their hurdle, right? I'm gonna be able to outlive the hurdle rate because I'm in the S&P. Those fears weigh heavily on them and make them more vulnerable to, not get rich quick, but literally like some kind of appeared shortcut or savings, right? And so they're naturally guard is down, and then the tools and weapons being used to penetrate that emotion are unprecedented, right? And so it's kind of a perfect storm for just being more vulnerable through no fault of their own. Um, let's so for anybody, by the way, if you're in Colorado and you want to have a one-on-one chat with Matt at any point, 970-820-0090. Human beings actually answer the phone. They're only open during business hours. So you won't get a robot. Anybody living in all 50 states, and with assets to protect in some way, shape, or form can call the Wyoming office 307-463-3600. Just getting that in is it's in the chat. But for those who do want to have a consult, pre-consult, something like that, where they could get a little bit more granular on any of this stuff, make sure we do that. What's the most heartbreaking, without giving up any specifics, obviously that you can't, what's the most heartbreaking situation you've seen that really could have been prevented with some better planning or some simple stuff? Like, what's one that's top of mind?
Yeah, there's a story of a client's mother was living in a assisted living type of thing and starting to get dementia and, from Alzheimer's, and um, she wasn't paying her rent to the assisted living place, so it was going to get evicted and that kind of thing. And so the children, came to us and through other attorneys and kind of said, "Hey, can we get her found incapacitated so we can take over managing the money and paying for her care here so she didn't get evicted." And what she was doing, Chris, she had a little garage unit with it, and she was buying refrigerators and filling them with Omaha steaks.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, it's mom, you need to pay for this instead of buying this stuff. So went to a doctor because there wasn't any incapacity panel or anything like that that had been set up. So went to used the statutes, and it said either a physician or a licensed psychologist could say that you weren't incapacitated. You were incapacitated for financial affairs, and went to that. And so basically went to the doctor who was attending this person and asked him if they would certify that she was no longer capable of handling her finances. And the doctor who probably had great counsel of their own, attorney of their own, basically didn't want to take on that liability of taking away this person's livelihood and check writing ability, and just basically said it's her money. She can spend it on what she wants. Whether that's the right call or wrong call, is not for me to make. But the point was we really didn't have anybody to turn over the purse strings, if you will, so that the family could take care of her. And before she got evicted, she ended up passing away.
Hmm.
But before any of the kids or anybody could get over to the facility, the assisted living place, all the meat in the refrigerators were gone. So everyone knew she was being, scammed or pressured or talked into buying this stuff instead of paying for
Mm.
the house. And that was just tragic. And but most of it starts with a phone call somewhere. So that's the big thing, is trying to get all the phones.
So again, another good segue. So a lot of people assume that the danger could come from strangers, which in that case was kind of an example of that. Family dynamics can create their own risk, though. So how often do the biggest problems actually come from people inside the family circle? Is it, in your experience, like, is it, ballpark 50-50? Is it heavily one way versus the other?
Well, we never get to observe the ones where it doesn't happen. So
Right, right.
no one ever comes in and says, "Hey, we got a really easy situation here. Can we pay you money to have you
Right.
watch it?" Um, so you would get kind of jaded in what we see. But there's a lot of family members who can take advantage, and it's not because the family member is mean or predisposed that way. A lot of times it happens because there is no plan in place other than the caregiver, who's usually a family member, has been put on the bank account. And the bank account's the only asset, maybe the house, but, sometimes those are the 2 assets. We're not talking about, large estates or anything like that. But the bank, they're on the bank account. And while this caregiver is taking care of mom, uh, mom's always saying, "Well, you're on the account because I want you to split it with your brothers and sisters." And of course, as a caregiver, and of course, you probably really mean it. You say, "Yeah, mom, I'm going to take care of it," and that kind of thing. And you honestly probably do mean it. But as the illness wears on, 1 year, 2 years, and you found that you've quit your job so you can take care of mom, you're changing diapers, you reverse the roles here. You're now the caregiver instead of the child. So you've gone through that whole thing of what's it like to no longer be the child. That's some major mind shifts there. And you're taking care of this person 24/7, right? Because you don't know you're supposed to protect yourself and get other people to come in and do like that. You're just a dutiful daughter or son, and you're just spending all your time doing this. Um, it gets to the point when the other 2 kids are showing up maybe for Thanksgiving, but not Christmas because they didn't have time or whatever. And then when the death happens, and all of a sudden you get grips with, okay, the person I was totally focused on is now gone, and now I'm gonna focus on, what I'm gonna do with the estate. You can get to the point where you say, "Man, I've taken care of all this for 3 years, 2 or 3 years. They never even showed up for Christmas, never quit their jobs, I deserve this money
Mhm.
because I didn't take a dime for doing this." And it's not because you're mean or anything like that, it's just
No, it's just
so
human. It's a human, there's all kinds of things in there. So is one of the simple fixes there a forced conversation, but in a proactive, healthy way between siblings that says, "Look, we either hire somebody else or we hire me. I'm the cheapest labor we're gonna have, but we have to account for it." Is it overly simplified, but is that a amendment? Is that written into a trust document somewhere? Where does that live if you were to create an understanding that would help you not only prevent that negative, guilty response, because that person might also feel guilty about feeling like they deserve it. There's all kinds of emotions people go through, right?
and we talked about the reversing roles emotion, but there's also burnout and a whole bunch of things going on there.
Right.
But yes, if an agreement between people, if you have a relationship between people, that's usually some sort of a contract, which is why the will wouldn't work here because the will
Right.
doesn't come into effect until the death occurs. But it could be in a trust. It could be in what we call a caregiver agreement or something like that. It's just, hey, you know, um, for X amount of dollars per hour, I'm going to do this. And you got to keep it in line. You can't be like charging more than the surrounding actual licensed caregivers and things like that. But you can come in with those kind of things. And if you have them in place, and in some states, they'll help you if you need to get government assistance at a time because that's part of the spin down to get ready for government assistance because it's a legitimate. It's not legitimate if you're just leaving it in there and say, well, when they die, I'm going to take my share. You got to have some kind of agreement before a lot of the health departments will honor that as a spin down and things like that. But that's one of the things you can do. And yes, it can be in a trust. And in addition, something like a trust would say, okay, when I pass, it's going to go thirdsies if you had 3 kids.
Right.
However, when I'm incapacitated, I want this person to take care of me, and I wanna use the money that's in my account to take care of me, so the trustee will, like, pay the other siblings. So if you had agreement between the family, one could be the trustee, the other one could be the caregiver, and just kinda have that going where you submit your time and you get paid for it.
One
So
of
you
the
just need to
Yeah,
figure it out.
one of the questions is, like, it's just racing across my mind right now because it's an active one. I think a lot of families are having this, is the conversation between siblings that is, segregated from any conversation that's happening directly, maybe at the moment with parents, right? So, for instance, 2 siblings going, "Hey, we're not in a bad situation yet, but what are your thoughts? Like, when mom or dad when one of them gets to this stage, like, I don't see myself, or I would like to, or I think you assume that I'm going to do it, or I don't see myself being in a position where I want to do it, can do it, emotionally want to do it. But what are we going to do? Because I don't want you to feel the burden of feeling like it has to fall to you. Because there's always that kid who, even if they don't want to do it, they kind of are expected to, right? And then there's the siblings who kind of get the hall pass there. And then there's the nuances in between, which is maybe somebody actually would like to do it, but that's not the role in the family dynamic they've always played. And so, how do I even bridge that? And oh, by the way, then there's what mom wants and what dad expects. And those could be completely different things. So, just having those conversations amongst, call it the siblings, and trying to align there before or in parallel to then saying, Mom, Dad, what are your wishes, whether they can communicate them or not, and then trying to come to some alignment.
Right.
That's a lot of work. It's important work, though.
Yeah, but it's work no one really wants to talk about. So it's, you got to have a champion to kind of bring it up and bring that in there because usually the caregiver is picked because of proximity.
Right.
They're right there in the same town. And why are they in the same town? Because a lot of times the elder person has moved to that closer to that one person because they know that they would take care of them. So there's always this unwritten, unspoken expectation. Well, the reason I'm living in this town is because you're here, and shoot, I may be living in your basement because I can't afford anything else. So that's where it happens, But there is the potential again for that unequal burden and disagreement on what care should be available. We hear clients who are just like, well, if anything happens to you, we're sticking you in a skilled nursing facility and memory care unit. And, the spouse is like, well, I better not die because the kids are going to put you in the, care right away. And I'm keeping you in the house. And then there's that stress. And then there's also, we see a lot of statistics where the caregiver, because of the additional stress they have, they actually end up passing away before the people they're caring for.
Or they get divorced or any number of other things, right? Because it puts too much.
Right, right. And so we're not good as a nation, in my opinion, on, talking to each other about these kind of things, but the conversations really need to be had, and talking about what we're going to do. And if we need government assistance or whatever, how are we going to get on that? What do we need to have somebody move in with us and sell the house? And okay, so this is the new budget. So are we going to bring in uh, private care for a couple hours a day to give the caregiver a break? Are we going to rotate it? Does everyone, spend 3 months with mom or dad or whatever? Or do we get a facility to help out? And those are all things that you pretty much can talk about to your siblings, but it's best if you could talk about it with your parent as well so they could say, this is what I want to have happen. So they can give your wishes because what's best for mom and dad typically will trump what the kids want to have happen because they know what the parents' wishes. So it really needs to be a family discussion. And sometimes those are at, Christmas time or Thanksgiving when everyone's together, which, is supposed to be a joyful celebration, but it's also it's also time I found when we have people come in to our office a lot. It was right after those big holidays because they're looking at their brothers and sisters and saying, "Man, do I look that old? I better go get something done."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, the proactive thing, and again, just for those who are new, thanks for all the people here on the live. That's great. Our best turnout yet on the live. Keep bringing folks back. These are every Wednesday. The billable hour is on Matt and I, and for the paid subscribers, which I think is less than 30 cents a day, that get access to all the playbooks and stuff. We're trying to create the platform and the playbooks that you can use to have these conversations, and give them to you for basically the cost of bits. So if you haven't subscribed yet, free or otherwise, please do so. And we'd love to have you and continue to shape the content around your comments, your concerns. We're here to serve in that regard. As we think about that, protection without control, eventually every child wrestles with where that line exists. And is it when we think about fast forward to some of the new dynamics, right? When everything used to be on paper, like you said, it was fine because you could just open up the mail and you could go, okay, here's all the bills that mom and dad have. Here's all the statements and accounts that mom and dad have. And here's the file cabinet where their life is, right? Whatever that is. In a world now where even if mom and dad hate the fact that they have an iPhone, because I guarantee you, my mother does not want an iPhone. But the problem is she can't get another phone when she walks into Verizon anymore. So, like, she doesn't have the choice, right? Everyone's sucked in whether they wanna be or not to the reality, and so in a world where you have either digitally resistant or even Luddite type parents, but they are now being forced into that, the password problem, forget whether they're incapacitated or not, what are the containers? Is it the LastPasses of the world? What is it that you've seen people use to just try and make sure they have access to the things, the 2FAs, to the things that could lock somebody out from even getting information?
Well, that's why we do what we do. Part of it, we call that lost property. You just don't know where it is. And if you look at a will, a standard will, it leaves specific items to kids, but very limited. And it says all my rest, remainder, and residue, which may be $5, $10 million. It leaves to the kids 50-50. And so they're sitting in the office looking at me because someone's passed away with a smartphone or whatever without any passwords, and they look at me and say, "What do you think rest, remainder, and residue means?" And then we're trying to find that out. That's a lot of times why people one of the reasons why people will actually look at doing a trust, because a trust, in order to work, you have to retitle your assets into the name of the trust. And there should be a tab in the trust document itself where you can put the assets that you've retitled in there. And usually those are banks or brokerage accounts or houses or, deeds and things like that. But then the trust also can set up somebody as a successor trustee who takes over either when you become incapacitated or when you pass away. So there's already people expecting you to take over. And a lot of it is if you know on the iPhone there's an account at a certain bank, but the bank's in the name of the trust and you're the successor trustee, it doesn't matter if you don't have the 2FA or anything like that because you have direct access. You know what you're looking for. And that's a key. It could be in a
Yeah. So one of the
manila folder.
right, so just to pin that point, keep going, but I wanna clarify that point. So one of the things is by creating that living trust document, by having that in place, the very access of funding it, retitling assets to that trust usually uncovers the majority. It may not get all the rest and residue, but it gets the majority of accounts, access, things like that into the name of the trust versus the name of the individual. And so therefore it bypasses if I lose the phone and I need KYC from the individual who's no longer able to give it or access it. Do you recommend or do you see also putting even at a certain point the mobile phone account and some of that in that trust name? In other words, title that to there, or does that not necessary?
Well, that's probably not an asset. That's more of a liability and a bill that they want money every year or every month. So I do recommend like putting some protection on that phone because that phone is kind of like the gateway to scammers, if you will. I mean, even if you're being taken care of in a community or a assisted living or even a memory care, if you have access to your phone, you can be scammed. You can give away the farm there. So there's a call blocking technology and built into tools in the phone that can silence the calls, send them to voicemail if it doesn't recognize them, things like that. But there's some things you can do to protect yourself with that phone. But yeah, I mean the phone's usually the gateway to your Gmail or your email, which is where they're actually sending the statements and things like that.
The
So
reason why I brought this, I'm so glad you answered the question the way you did because I didn't know how you were going to answer that, and it wasn't bait, but you answered it in a way where I'm going to make my point, which is it's not an asset, but most people think that it is. even if they know it's an expense, they think that the phone or the email is theirs. And in 99% of the world's case, those things and the data therein that is the juice of that, like the real value of those things, is actually not owned by the person. It's owned by the Apple ID or the Gmail, which is owned by Apple or Google. And the very nature of thinking that it's ours uh, changes our dynamic, right? So this process of funding a trust with our assets also means what are the access points to our data, to our information? Because our data and our existence is our asset, but the way that that's been turned into bits, right, is not our asset, and yet it's the very entry point that all of these bad things and all of these complexities will come. It will come through the thing we don't own, and so putting our assets that we do own in a trust, titling them that way, at least gives us certainty that when we can't control the entry point from the phone or whatever, when we can't get access to that, when we don't own that, when no one will give us our data, when the Gmail statement is being read by Gmail and used to serve us ads against long-term care or whatever it is because they see that we're in the market for that, or when the AA meeting or whatever the thing is lands in our Gmail, then we start getting ads for that. All that minutia goes away because when it comes time to execute, where is the assets and who has access to them, at least if it's titled in the trust name, you and I as the executor of that trust or the administrator have a way to do something with it.
Right. You need to know who the custodian is and have the prior authorization to step in at some event, whether it's incapacity or death. Um, and you can even in the trust, you can even leave, the master password to your one master pass to get into those things. And if you don't trust your two kids, you could leave half of it the password in one safe deposit box and the other half in another safe deposit box, and give each one of them a key. So they have to come together to do it. But that's the key is to think about. It's almost like you're moving the assets ahead of time so that you don't have to have someone move them after you pass away.
Right. Yeah. It's creating the container by which and then you have we talked about this last week for those who want to check that episode out. You have the kind of coffee cup without a lid, the revocable trust, and then you have the coffee cup with a lid, the asset protection trust, the irrevocable trust, and you put the assets in each based on whether you need them now while you're alive or whether you're just going to be generationally passing those down and don't need access to them and want protection around them. So there's a combination effect there. A pour over well. What is a pour over well for those who don't know what that is or have heard of it but don't know? Because that's also as it remains to rest and residue that plays a role. So just to kind of give people something to think about there.
Right. Well, pourable will, it's spelled Pour, not Poor, which, most people talking to attorneys think Poor, but we're talking about the other four. And what it does is if you did not have time or you just forgot about an asset and didn't have it titled to the name of the trust, you can use that will to go through probate and take that asset and pour it into the trust so that the rules of the trust, are a lot more robust than the rules of the will take care of that asset. Might have to go through probate, which is one of the reasons a lot of people get the revocable trust is to go ahead and avoid that probate process. Um, each state has a certain limit. If you're under that limit, it's more of a shorter process, a summary process. If it's over a certain dollar limit, you have to go through more formal probate. But that's just a way to get it back into the trust. And so if the trust does have that lid on it, like you mentioned, and it is asset protected, then you're pouring that asset from the estate account, which is the account you have when you pass away. That's not in a trust. You pour that in the trust and you can have that asset asset protected as well. So that's the key there. But again, you have to find that property. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's a mineral deed. I had a house, I sold it, I retained the mineral rights and sold the rest of the house. So I'm now no longer living in the house. So, somebody that you're leaving it to has to realize that even though we we don't have a house there, we own the minerals, right? And
Right.
to ask for those and things like that, because you forget to put that in there.
And that's gonna be more and more important in the world where obviously we hear about rare earths and all this stuff all the time, but a lot of folks that live in Wyoming or Texas or California or anywhere where there's, good stuff underground that we need more and more to fund all this chip heavy world that we're moving into, the mineral rights might be worth something a couple generations from now, even if they're, not something that the generation that owned them
True.
benefited. So, a lot of things to think about there. The role that we talked about is really kind of this role of the quarterback, whether they want to be there or not. They end up the Gen Xer is going to end up more likely than not becoming the quarterback in some aspect of their family dynamic as it relates to this transfer of wealth that's everyone's reading about. But let's talk about the defensive side. So, for both their own say, for both their own sanity and also for um, their family and their aging parents. What are like the handful, 3 to 5, whatever it is, defensive measures everyone should have in place immediately, if not sooner, to protect, aging parents and also their own sanity, over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, you need to have a power of attorney in place. Actually, two of them, one for the financial side and the other for the medical side. The medical one is the one that makes the medical decisions and things like that. Those are important for anybody, any age. I mean, it's just what if you're incapacitated because of a medical procedure or surgery didn't go well, you need to have someone in place to make a decision for you that the doctor can find relatively quickly to do that. So the medical power of attorney is really important. And the financial power of attorney, which allows you to get access to the accounts, is important as well. You can make that financial power of attorney effective immediately upon signing, or you can make it effective at a later date, which is like when you become incapacitated, you can make it limited. Um, you can only use this power of attorney when I'm out of the United States or whatever. There's a lot of things you can do, but you need to have that in place in case something goes wrong because if you don't have that, you're not able to talk to some of the government officials on behalf of this person. You're not able to put things in a trust form. It depends what the power of attorney says. It's like a string of Christmas lights, right? You got all these powers, which are the different colors of the lights, but you only get that power because it's plugged into the main person, and they only give you the Christmas lights that they want. They only give you the power you want, but they can be quite specific. So those are definitely what everyone needs, and they need to be signed while you're competent in your life, so that you can manage these things. Typically, those are a little better than putting someone on your accounts because if you put someone on your account and they get into an accident or something like that, the made for TV attorneys can come in and take that account because your name's on it. You're an owner.
Right. The liability then so essentially, if that person gets into something, no fault of their own or on their own, that creates a liability in a creditor claim, now their reason for being on your account was just so that you had access, but now that's listed as one of their assets that can now be drained in a judgment.
Right. And,
Power of attorney is much cleaner because it prevents that creditor reach from the person who's
right.
just here to administer.
And a lot of times the account, half of it is more than $19,000, which is the current gift limit without filing a gift tax return. So, if it's a $40,000 account, you put your one child on it, you just gifted them kinda 20,000, so technically, you're supposed to fill out a gift tax return to do that, so there's a lot of things. The other thing is if it's payable on death, it switches over. It's what we call joint tenancy. If someone is incapacitated instead of passed away, without a power of attorney, you can't move anything, it only moves when that person passes away. We see a lot of people and they're gonna avoid probate and everything by putting their kids on their house. Again, if the kids get in an accident, they can take that portion of the house, the, plaintiff's attorneys. But if, um, mom becomes incapacitated and can't sign off on the deed without a power of attorney, you can't sell that house to get money to take care of mom. You have to wait until she passes away. So, those powers of attorney are real important.
And
We
it
don't
may also mean you can't refinance it, right?
Yeah, yeah, that
Sell
that's
or
that's
refi yeah. So that's a key one. So power of attorney is a defensive thing. There's two forms, financial, and then the other one was
The healthcare power of
medical
attorney.
directive one. What's another defensive tactic?
Well, along with the healthcare side, it's very important to get a HIPAA release, a Health Information Portability Accountability Act, and that gives people the authority to ask about you in a medical situation. Whenever we go to the doctor and things like that, they once a year they usually ask us, who can they give the information to? Can they leave a voicemail on this phone number about your condition and things like that? You have to give a release to do that, and that's very important because without that, the agent under the medical power of attorney won't be able to ask any questions of the doctor. He'll just have to make the decision. So you want both of those. And then to round out the healthcare side, we also recommend that you have an advance directive. And this is just your wishes in advance before you need it, how you're going to direct people to take care of you should you be in a persistent vegetative state or a terminal condition or something like that. In other words, how long do you want to remain on life support and how long do you want to remain on artificial nutrition and hydration? And that just takes the person making your decisions kind of off the hook for making that decision should that happen to you.
What about people who are the guardian or parents of children under the age of 18 that need something defensive in place in the event of their untimely demise, regardless of all the other things? What is the defensive play there?
And those are typically, I mean, these are state specific, so it kind of depends on where people are. But what we find is typically, uh, if you're in a state that you need to appoint a permanent guardian, a lot of times that is through the probate process and whatnot. So you need to have at least a document saying, I want this person to be the guardian of my child, permanent guardian of my child, should something happen to me. And you may also be in a state that if that permanent guardian is not appointed, that they will put your child in foster care until they get someone appointed. And so for those type of states, we suggest a temporary guardian, which is like a power of attorney and both financial and medical power of attorney for that child for up to a length of time, sometimes up to a year. But anyway, it gives time, it buys time where they can be with this person during the time that they're trying to get the permanent guardian appointed. So it keeps them out of the Child Protective Services agency there.
Which I
Um,
think everybody would like to make sure that happens if they're a parent. I know that's one of the things that keeps me up at night is just not wanting a state or someone other than my wife or I to decide where our children happen to go if something was, God forbid, to happen to both of us. For those who are in states other than Colorado, if you want one-on-one time with Matt or his team, complimentary pre-consult call, just dial 307-463-3600. You'll get a human on the other side and you can kind of get some of your own personal questions answered. If you're inside the state of Colorado, please call that office 970-820-0090. Or check out yourtrustedplanner.com. If you're also in Northern Colorado, Matt does live workshops complimentary in the community every other week. In the Fort Collins, Windsor, Northern Colorado area, you can go to yourtrustedplanner.com and you can check one of those out. And then every week, Wednesdays, we're doing these live on Substack with your questions and some of our own and my own for your educational benefit. Again, not legal advice until you have a lawyer engaged, but stuff to think about, food for thought, important things that you can take to Matt or whoever your counsel is and start to put some defense and some proactive measures in place. Um, Lastly, if there's a couple things that we can actually do before I give Matt the final word here on this session, is give us a heart on the old algo. It likes that. If you got value out of this, restack it tells people that you were here, and it tells others that we're here, and Substack likes that, treats us well, and so those things really help go a long way. And most importantly, leave a comment, leave a question, join the conversation. This is not for us. I mean, I've got a lot of my questions answered every time I talk with Matt, and every time I do one of these shows, I come up with more. So I'm getting what I need, but the real goal here is to get you what you need. So if we missed a question, if there's a concern, if you phrase it a different way, if there's a dynamic that you're willing to share, comment, share it. If you've been through a story, if you know someone, share the post. It'll come out on replay with a full article write up and a bunch of value for all those who are subscribed. And it'll come out. You can share it right from there to someone who you know needs it. So those are the requests. Thank you for tuning in, Matt. Final thought for today's session. What do you want to leave people with for today's Matt chats?
Just give us a call if you want to discuss a little more about phone safety and things like that. I think the phone is the thing that needs to be locked up the most when you have somebody who's susceptible to scammers and things like that. So there's software out there to help you and do those kind of things. So that's what I would do to start the process of protecting my parent. But you always got to keep broaching the conversation. You got to keep the communication lines open and try to get things fixed ahead of time before the crisis event happens.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you on behalf of everybody for being here for another Matt chat on our Shields and Succession Digest. Guys, subscribe, tune in, read the articles, read the playbooks, share them with a friend. Matt, we'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.